Welcome back to some Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, as shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we'll be relaxing as per usual. I wonder if I should talk about this today. Not about like it's a bad thing to talk about or something, but I've not maybe had enough time to digest it. But yeah, again, I did write with the other one. So if the title of today's episode is something along the lines of with our hands covered with scars or something, then it's about a Project Sakai. The newest event in the JP version, which is one of two events I've read in Japanese, because I was like, I have to read exactly what's going on in this event immediately. So if you want the prequel to this one, look for the Animal Crossing episode called where does the Path of Thorns lead to, or something like that. Anyway, good evening everyone, and on Fawnhallow it's 9:44 p.m. on Sunday, December 1st, 2024. Bust out those advent calendars, everyone. If you're using it, and if not, then I don't know. Fair enough, don't. But yeah, to give you a brief sort of summary of what's going on, Project Sakai basically has this very okay, let's start from the beginning. Project Sakai, what is it? It's a Japanese rhythm game based around 20 original characters and some very popular Vocaloid characters, or virtual singers as called. You might know one called Hatsune Miku. But there's also a couple of others, such as the Kagamine Rin and Kagamine Ren, Meiko, Ruka, Kaito. Is that all of them? I think that's all of them. And the story, it basically follows these 20 different, is that 25 different, no, 20. Yes, 20 different high school sort of students. And it's basically an anime, but in like a storybook format with a rhythm game to go kind of along with it. And the general premise is basically these they are forming 5 different groups of 4 characters each covering like a different style or genre of music, and they can go into this like pocket dimension called a Sakai, which means a world, where there is a different version of these Vocaloid singers there, like their Sakai version of Hatsune Miku. For example, like one of them is called Vivid Bad Squad, and they're all about sort of like street music and that sort of street style and that sort of thing. And their Hatsune Miku's got like street fashion on and everything. That's basically it. And they all have like all the virtual singers have different personalities. So that's a TLDR. And then what happened is that one of the most popular bands, the 2 very popular ones, Wonderland Showtime and one called Nigo, which is Night Called at the 25th Hour, is what it's technically called, but it's shortened to 25 in Japanese. So one of the bands, Nigo, is like this underground band. Their music is very sort of undergroundy, grungy. I'm not sure grungy is the right word, but it's got like a slight edge to it, you know, the sort of like I'm not sure if edgy teenager is the right way to put it, but sort of like they cover a lot of topics of like mental, you know, distress, shall we say, mental illness and sort of like self-hatred, that sort of thing. So they got like a very on the outside looking in, sort of very depressing, I suppose, sort of style to them. But they're very popular. They're also my favourite band as well. Because I just like their music the best, I guess, because it's often quite melancholic. But yes, and their stories, these 4 character stories, are a lot about their own personal character growth. Because a lot of the other ones might be about like achieving something. Like one of them is like a rock band trying to like go more professional, and another one is like that street group, or like the theatre group sort of like trying to tour around, that sort of thing. And one of the group's idol, the other group's the idol group trying to become like actual idols. This group doesn't really have like overarching aims like that. They're not like necessarily trying to become pro musicians. They're just like 4 people who basically found each other within their like darkest hours. And their growth is more about their character's growth, you know, like getting past the things and the trauma and the struggles they've had. And one of the characters used to be the central character for this group for a huge time, a character called Matthew, my favourite character. Where basically it was her entire story, I suppose. Big spoilers for Project Sakai, you know, don't listen on if you're worried about being spoiled about that. But her story was essentially revolving around the fact she had like a very abusive, controlling mother, and her breaking free from that. And it was super, super heartfelt. Like I think I touched upon it very lightly. But there's another very popular character called Mizuki, who very, you know, uniquely, I suppose, maybe not uniquely, but it's not something which is often covered, I feel like, especially in Japan, not too often in media fiction. a medium in the first place, but even lesser so, I suppose, in Japanese media. But it covers a topic of like identity and LGBT themes, I suppose. But specifically more about, identity and like self-identity and the sort of all the topics like tied within that. Essentially, this character is very much applied to be assigned male at birth, and currently in game presents very femininely. And it's been like a sort of ambiguity about like their gender and their identity and that sort of thing. I mean, their first image song they had was called ID Smile. So, and they sing about the identity about it. And they're a very popular character because they're very sort of like smiley, kind of like a sort of prankstery, like slightly gremlin energy sort of character. So they have a very fun personality as well, but their like character progress has been relatively slow because a lot of the character stories previously were focusing on this Matthew character, but now they're starting to focus a bit more on Mizuki. And you might know because there was a meme which got around really recently, but eventually in each of Mizuki's stories, like leading up, they were sort of like getting ready to try and like tell their secret. There's someone who's very like runs away from their problems, but they're like, no, I got to tell someone about it now. I might tell this friend group. So like the first one was like, oh, I really like this friend group. The first second event story was like the friend being like, I know you have a secret. I know you're not ready to tell me, but when you're ready, I will listen. And then they're being like, oh, I'm so thankful that I have these friends who will listen. The third event story was kind of like reminiscing about the past, about their older sister being like, hey, you can be whoever you want to be, essentially. And then the fourth character story is sort of, it's a bit interesting because it's quite also tied into the other character story. But it's basically like, if anything ever gets too much, you can just run away. That's what I did, So I guess that's kind of setting up for the fifth character story, which was meant to be, theoretically, this character is going to tell one of the other members, hey, this is my secret, my identity, etc., etc., etc. But what ended up happening, as you might know from the meme, is it goes horribly wrong because the teaser for that story was like the character's a shell-shocked face, essentially. And the song's called Bake no Hana, like BAKE space NO space HANA, if you want to listen to the song, just to get the general vibes of what happened during that event. Where, spoilers, the character was outed by people who did not really like them, I suppose, and like in a sort of bullying and teasing way. And so they didn't get to tell their friend personally, and then they saw their friend's reaction and misinterpreted it essentially as their friend sort of kind of like judging them, because a friend was understandably shocked, in a sense, where they were just like, I don't know what to say. This is like a huge secret you just revealed to me in like a terrible, not a terrible way, but like those people revealed it in a very terrible way, right? So there was a lot of tension, and things are very like high strung. Then Mizuki, the character, the trans character, sort of just runs away, essentially, being like, you're too nice. I don't want you to essentially have to tiptoe around on eggshells around me and have to think through every single conversation you ever have with me just to think, oh, you're not going to offend me. Oh, this is going to be fine. Oh, what can I say to make it better when other people start targeting you because of me? That's essentially it, and it's really, really heartbreaking. The entire event leaves on a big sort of cliffhanger where they run away, and then it's just like so much drama and tension. And then it changes actually the character in game. The character has different voice lines, like depressed voice lines from then on, and everyone's just been like, what is going on? So if you've seen that meme going around of like, do you hear ominous bells ringing? That's that character. And I've seen it crop up like weirdly outside of Project Sakai as well. But anyway, the event, which was released yesterday, or was it the day before, I can't remember, is the event to basically follow on from that, where the other character, who Mizuki was going to tell, who's called Enna, is basically like, I need to find Mizuki, I need to talk to them, that sort of thing. Like, I wish I could say something better. And it's a really beautiful, beautiful story, where basically it goes through, like, the lengths that they're going to, because they're just like, oh, they of course debate, like, do I need to give them space? Do I need to talk to them? I wish I said something better at that moment. And then it's been like, oh, if it was someone else in that moment, if I just found out a different way, like, would Mizuki still be here with us, speaking with us now properly, instead of hiding away? Because now Mizuki's like skipping out from school and everything, which they did a lot, to be fair, but so that's like kind of like what the first sort of part of the story is about. Like, hold on, I need to actually like get up the event story. previews, otherwise I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, because I read it like last night essentially, because I was like, what is going on, tell me. But I will say that the story, the cards themselves are really, really pretty and beautiful. They have like a sakura blossom sort of theme of both the characters basically looking at each other, and then the cherry blossoms going on in the background, which sort of ties into the sort of flower blooming motif that they had previously, but where they were saying like the flower blooming can't go back, is like a secret which can't go out. Now it's a flower blooming, and it's like this transient sort of beautiful thing instead of like the beautiful words of a fan lyric and translation of a bud being pried open. Anyway, so the first story is all about Enna being like, oh man, like I can't believe this has happened. This is not what I wanted to happen. Like, where's Mizuki? I hope they're okay. And then the second one is like I'm talking to one of like the virtual singers, being like, did you think this was going to happen? And then the virtual singer being like, no, and I don't think they wanted it to happen this way either. I can't remember what this third one was. Oh, they're trying to reach out like through different friends essentially. And that's what third and fourth one is. And them talking to a different mutual friend. And the mutual friend basically being like, you know, I was in like not the literally same situation, but basically was finding myself running away and withdrawing, and then someone else who was very, you know, iron-headed broke through that wall and got me out of it. Maybe you need to do the same thing. And then the fifth story is like her bringing in the other two members of her like little squad, being like, I can't tell you exactly what's going on, it's not my place to say, but we need to find Mizuki. And then the other two being like, you don't need to say anything, we've got you, we'll try and find her. And then the sixth story is like a really sad one, where it's like you see it from Mizuki's perspective and first person the entire time, where she's talking to the virtual singer, and the virtual singer eventually feeds back being like, I don't think Mizuki's like left the house for like ages. And it's very, very like depressing talk, just like they're just like watching a load of anime being like, I want I'm not going to say it because it, you know, maybe YouTube might misconstrue it, but there's a bit of like ideation, shall we going on there, and it's very sort of like heart-wrenching to see this character being so like downtrodden about everything. And then they're sort of like making up a plan, being like, okay, let's see what we can do, and they're going to try and catch them at the remedial classes. And then the 7th and 8th episode is just like, like absolute gut punch of episodes, where it shows Mizuki basically going to their remedial classes to try and sort of catch up on work, because they've been skipping school essentially the entire time. And then you see it from the other character's perspective, being like trying to find them. And then there's this big chase sequence as Mizuki runs again when Enna finally finds them. And then the 8th one is just basically the entire breakdown of emotions, of like this entire, all the emotions, all the words which wanted to be said on that day but couldn't be said, just between the two. And it's so sort of heart-wrenching, as this is like, please, you know, please stop running away, I want to be your friend, I want to be with you. And then Mizuki being like, I don't want you to have to walk on eggshells around me, I don't want you to be targeted just because I'm targeted as well, I don't know what I could say to you, I don't know what you would be able to say, I don't want you to have to think through everything you're ever going to say again just because of me. And then saying like some really great stuff, being like, don't decide my emotions for me. If I had to think about the fact of people looking at me funny or the future without you, the future without you is a million times worse. And it's just like, it's so heart-wrenching. It's very like dramatic, let's be real. It's like very perhaps over the top. Does this happen in real life? Probably, but not to me at least. not in that overly dramatic, heart-wrenching way, I think. Sorry, I just realised I still have a ponytail in my hair, so I'm just like taking it out slowly. Oh, it's because I went to an escape room. It's a very weird escape room. I'll talk about it probably tomorrow. But yes, just absolutely heart-wrenching, where they're pouring out all their emotions. I'm trying to remember what it said on it. It's like hard for me to remember the exact words being said. But it's like, yeah, don't decide my emotions for me, I want to be together, like, everyone's waiting for you. And then it's just sort of just like Mizuki like crying, being like, is this really okay, is it really fine, you know? And then Anna's being like, yeah, it is. And I can't describe it in words because it's just such a heart-wrenchingly sad conversation, I suppose. And yeah, and it kind of rounds up with Mizuki telling the rest of the members as well about their secret. And it's like, oh, beautiful. theoretically. Yeah, and there's a lot of commentary, I suppose, about this story, mainly because I don't believe it's ever explicitly said what Mizuki identifies as or what the secret technically is. So it like very much dances around the topic, which, you know, to the frustrations of a lot of the fans, but at least to me, I feel like it's very, very coded, like written as like a trans sort of like coming out story, no matter which way. And it doesn't really, I'm not sure if it matters necessarily what the identity is, because a lot of what's written up, what a lot of the characters, meta narrative of their story is basically like everything is so intertwined with this identity, that sort of thing. I wish I could just sort of like live my life normally rather than having, you know, like if I lived a different life and if people didn't judge me, then like my friends wouldn't have to think about what they say. I wouldn't want to run, etc, etc, etc. So ironically, I suppose, by the fact that everyone wanting a concrete answer to whatever Mizuki identifies as, it very much exemplifies the exact narrative which is going on in their story. So to me personally, it doesn't matter, but I understand why people would want it in the first place. You know, it's hard to find, I suppose, much representation, good representation, I suppose, in like Western media, and like even rarer in Eastern media. I say, yet again, not knowing the exact culture, so not knowing the exact situation with LGBT, I suppose, presentation in Japanese media. So, you know, perhaps it's not hypocritical necessarily for me to say, but it's not really my place to comment on it, right? But yeah, like to me, it doesn't need a concrete answer. Like, at least to me, I feel like the subtext is strong enough. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, you can, this feels like an identity coming out story. It doesn't matter if it's not explicitly said. Like, I'm just going to choose to fanon it as that, I guess, or canon it. Because that, like, I mean, come on. Like, that's kind of like what the entire story is like. All these stories are implying, IMA. But I understand the desire to have something a bit more concrete. But at the same time, you know, it's not always that easy. And you might be like, yeah, it should be that easy. It should just be as easy as writing a story. And I agree, it should be, but it's not. Because unfortunately, we live in a world where things without context, I suppose, things without the context of everything makes it a little bit harder. Because I think it's very easy for us, at least in the Western world, to sort of sit here and be like, oh yeah, like just say they're trans or whatever. But then it's also at the same time, in a lot of countries, you know, maybe the exploration or discussion of things, LGBT things, is like banned essentially. And what ends up happening there is like if there's any mention of it, that stuff just gets either cut entirely or the entire media property gets banned. So then the question becomes, you might feel like good, you know, and in my mind, I'm like, well, okay, you can say good from that, I suppose, but I feel like you're also missing out the part of that. There's going to be people in those countries who would want to still see these stories, who can still understand and fill in the blanks, right? And what's the easiest way to at least get this story to them is by, you know, you have to sort of circumvent the rules a little bit, be like, oh, this isn't an LGBT story. It's just a really, like, heartwarming story about sad, I don't know, girls or something. It reminds me of a thing where, like, they wanted to do, in League of Legends, they did like a Pride Month celebration, but then like, they called it like something else. And people were just like, I can't believe why just not use the word pride? And then it was just like, because they can't distribute it in countries where like anything about pride is banned. So they've called it Festival of Colours, and then everything is rainbow coloured. So they can point to it and I guess be like, see, it's not pride. While all the people who, you know, do celebrate pride in those countries, who can't maybe necessarily do it as openly, can be like, yes, Festival of Colours, right? And still get the benefit of having that. I just guess it's not as explicitly named. And I guess there's some, like, discussion there, which I'm not prepared to, I suppose, debate necessarily. Whether is that better or is that worse? It's sort of like compliancy. It's sort of like compliancy of a suppression or oppression, I guess. But it's doing it in the means of a way to bypass it rather than a means of obeying it, if that makes sense. So yeah, anyway, the long and short of it is, like, I don't think this character necessarily needs to explicitly look at the camera and be like, yes, I am trans or something, because I think the subtext is strong enough that it makes sense to read it that way. I didn't really talk about the story all that much, but it's a really heartwarming story. It's basically just the conclusion to for wherever Rose of Thorns leads. So I don't know what's going to happen with this character now, as her there, I don't know, arc is like kind of like wrapped up almost now. So we just got like the 2 other characters left, and one of the characters, the Enna characters, kind of like well on her way to doing some pretty good things. And the other characters is, well, I don't know, we'll see. So yeah, Event Story, it's beautiful. I loved it, and the cars are beautiful. And it was a well worth a wait, I think, for payoff, even if not everyone thinks so. I enjoyed it. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.